vessel, River Duchess. We start all of our journey with a brief and safety announcement, so if I could just have your attention for a couple of moments. River Duchess is equipped with sufficient life-saving equipment for everybody on board. These take the form of orange buoyant apparatus and a self-inflating white life raft. These are supplemented by orange life ring, which is suspended around the outside upper rails and the lower deck aft rails. The buoyant apparatus and life ring would float free in the event of an emergency. However, the life raft would have to be launched by myself or a member of my crew. We also have fire extinguishers, which are situated downstairs in the saloon and alongside me here in the wheelhouse. In the highly unlikely event of an emergency during the next hour, please stay calm. Follow any instructions given by myself or my crew members. If instructed to evacuate the vessel, do so via your nearest accessible exit. Passengers in the saloon should know that the windows marked emergency exit slide open, and these along the entrance and exits at the front and after the vessel could be used in the event of an emergency. For minor injuries, we have a first aid kit, and this is located behind the bar. I would also take this opportunity to point out to everybody on board that River Duchess is in fact a non-smoking vessel, which includes e-cigarettes and vapes. So if you do smoke, if you could just refrain for the next hour, please. My name is John, I'm your skipper, and down below we have Charlie and we have Tom. They're doing all the hard work, selling tickets, untying the lines, serving hot and cold drinks, alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages, ices and a few snacks. Whereas my job is to drive the boat, avoid bumping into things, and to tell you stories. And the first thing I'm going to mention is my storytelling endeavours, and these entrances about water height on the right-hand side here. In medieval times, there used to be a large wooden jetty that extended the whole length of this wall. It was called St. Peter's Wharf. The medieval tradesmen and fishermen used to land their catches and their goods on St. Peter's Wharf, and using these medieval trade tunnels, they would take their goods up underneath the busy medieval streets to the marketplace in Coney Street. Alas, they're all silted up now, but as it would be fantastic to get down and explore the medieval trade routes under the city. They say they extend all the way from Micklegate all the way to the Minster itself. Now, on the left-hand side, I'd like to attract your attention to that rather fine-looking building. That's the Aviva Insurance Headquarters. But more than that, it's a pristine example of the sympathetic school of architecture. The architect has endeavoured to create the impression of towers, turrets, battlements, and it's clad in a magnesium limestone. That material is also known as Yorkstone, as its popularity in building in the historical phases of development of York. If you look at the building opposite, it's actually made from the same material. But there's over 650 years between the construction of the two buildings. I think the awards or advantage architects are well earned indeed, as it fits in so well with the medieval and older phases of construction we found here in the beautiful city of York. That's Scarborough Bridge. That was the first ever railway bridge anywhere in the world to connect an inland city with a coastal port. No prize for guessing which one. Scarborough. It was actually constructed in 1845 and it was designed by Robert Stephenson, son of George Stephenson, the famous Stephenson rocket plane. The actual stone pillars you see are the original Victorian stone pillars. However, the span was replaced officially in 2019. After 160 odd years of trains tumbling over it, the Victorian span had become very rickety indeed. Every time a train went over, bricks were falling off into the river. They started to pose a hazard to navigation, so they had to replace the old span. However, the new one holds true to the original Robert Stephenson design, in that it's both a pedestrian bridge and a train bridge. And when you share the bridge with a train, the wheels churn around just about head height as it makes its way across the bridge. It can be quite disconcerting if you're not prepared for it. Now, as we come level with the houses on the right-hand side, if you look, they've got their normal wrought iron railings and headwork on the bottom of the garden, but they've got a new feature. Halfway up the garden, they have a second wall topped with glass plates and interspaced with large grey steel doors. In the year 2000, the York suffered its highest ever recorded flood. That was at 5.5 metres, or nearly 18 feet. It flooded most of these houses, most of the city centre. Those secondary walls with those big steel doors and glass plates are actually the most recent addition to York's flood defences. And those actual gates would hold a flood of 5.5 metres at bay. I often wonder why these glass plates on top of the walls and gates though. I wonder if it's when the householders get trapped in their houses by the rising waters, do they entertain themselves by watching the fish swim by? Well, as we emerge from Scarborough Bridge, I left on that large building out on the left-hand bank. That's the National Railway Museum. We're very proud of the National Railway Museum here in York, as it was the first national museum of any form to be opened outside of London. It's the largest railway museum in the world. It features 250 rail and rail-related exhibits. I've already mentioned one of them. George Stephenson's rocket museum. In 1829, that became the fastest machine in the world, travelling at some 30 miles an hour. Doctors at the time said it was untenable for human beings to travel at such velocities without going insane. I don't know what they would have made of the Japanese Shinsen bullet train, which is quite close to the Stephenson's rocket in there. That travelled about 15 to 20 times faster than the rocket. And it's the only Shinsen bullet train on display anywhere outside of Japan. My favourite one of the exhibits is the Lendal Bridge mallard. The mallard in 1938 set the world's steam speed record at 126 miles per hour. Now, that record is still unbroken today. I am often asked by passengers though, why do you think that Sir Nigel Gresley was named his fastest ever locomotive after something as ungainly and clumsy as the common duck? Well, Sir Nigel Gresley was a keen ornithologist and did name a lot of his locomotives after birds. And as a keen ornithologist, he would have also known that the humble duck, that ungainly, clumsy creature, in straight and level flight can reach 75 miles an hour. Fact check, just David Attenborough. Both scientists and ornithologists have argued quite hotly over the years why they think that the ducks should fly so fast. I think the consensus opinion is it flies so fast because it's just so very, very tempting, especially on the soil and easily responsive. Well, let me tell you a little bit about the river we're traveling. We're traveling on the River Ouse. Now this is one of 5 river Ouses in the country. None of them are connected waterways at all. The only thing that connects them is their name itself, or rather the Celtic root of their name. It's the Celtic root word Minster, meaning fast-flowing water or river. So in Celtic terms, the coffee said we're actually travelling on the river. It's the 6th longest river in the country, and the only one in the top 10, but entirely within the confines of one county. It has no source of stone. It's actually made from confluence of three other rivers, the River Swale, the River Mid, and the River Ura. This all takes place at about 10.5 miles upstream at a place called Abbey. Now, it's lost in the mists of history as to why something that looks significant in the bay, a tiny little waterway, no more than a drainage ditch, fits its name to the greater waterway. That defies the normal naming tradition. However, we do know from Anglo-Saxon writings, yes indeed, has been removed for over 1,300 years. In addition to not having a source of its own, it has no estuary of its own. And 62.5 miles downstream, it merges with the River Fawkes, which then empties into the Humber, which meets Spurn Point, which the North Sea is Spurn Point. It's a very clean river. It hosts multivariate species of fish, and in turn they supply food for many different types of fishes and birds, and indeed fishes and mammals. I myself have been keeping an eye out for a family of otters that live just down the river of this. I'm often asked, well, if it's such a cool river, why does it look so dirty? Well, about 2,000 square miles of Yorkshire countryside actually empty into this river. Those vast swathes of Yorkshire dales and countryside contain many peat beds. Peat beds contain tannins, and much as the tannins in your cup of tea turn the water brown, the tannins absorbed by the water runoff or snow melt absorb the tannins from the peat beds. They in turn turn the water this greeny brown colour. And talking of tannins in cups of tea, if you've had a cup of tea or coffee while you've been hearing water thus, you're actually drinking water from this very river, as it still supplies York and all of the surrounding countryside with all this water moves. I'll just give you a break for a couple of minutes. We're going to be turning the boat around. Now I will be making 2 drafts of the ship's horn. Don't worry, that isn't a distress signal. It's simply the internationally recognised sound signal for a vessel making a turn to port or to the left. The elevation of the Minster behind the central tower, the 2 western bell towers of York Minster. That grand central tower is the tallest building here in York. It stands at 213 feet, and it's likely to remain the tallest building because the bylaws in place that stop anything being built taller or closer to the face of God than the grand central tower of York Minster. Anything bigger in the plans and becomes closer will be automatically rejected. That grand central tower also contains the world's largest and many reasons stained glass window. In 1941, the window was assembled for shipment to a pursued coal mine in Wales. It was to protect it from German bombing. The conservators had disassembled it, catalogued over 1 million pieces of coloured glass. It must have posed quite a jigsaw puzzle to put it back together after the end of hostilities. The building itself is Northern Europe's largest Gothic building. Now that is by the specific measurement of the volume alone, because even here in England, Shaftesbury is taller and Winchester is longer. It took a staggering 250 years to build. It was originally consecrated by the Archbishop of Walter de Grey in the year 1205, but it wasn't completed until 1472. Now that's not how long medieval stonemasons would take to erect such a megalith. If you travel just a little further north to Durham, you'll see another rather grand Norman cathedral. That only took 80 years from consecration to completion. It's more of a statement of the political, social and religious unrest that York went through during the period of its construction than a statement on the skill of the medieval stonemasons. I'd like to keep your attention on the left-hand side, and that building over there will be 4 towers and the church spire behind it. Now that's St. Peter's School. Simply put, that's the oldest school in England, and perhaps the 3rd or 4th oldest continuous seat of education anywhere on the planet. It was actually opened in the year 627 by the Anglo-Saxonizers of Paul Linus. It's, now just put that in perspective, that's some 200 years before even the Vikings got there. And it's still a school today. It moved to its current location in the 17th century. The land upon which it sits was purchased by the school from the father of one of the pupils. Now that pupil was possibly York's most infamous son. His name was Guy Fawkes. Guy Fawkes and fellow conspirators planned to assassinate James I on the 5th of November 1605. To do this, they filled the basement of the House of Parliament with large barrels of gunpowder, intending to blow up the House of Parliament when King James visited. He was a Protestant monarch and they wanted to replace him with a Catholic. However, on the night of the 4th of November, Guy Fawkes, posing as John Johnson, was discovered in the cellar with the gunpowder. When questioned between intentions, he replied, "I intend flying you beggars back to the Scottish mountains from whence you came." It was taken as a little bit of a confession. I don't think I would have said that. I think I would have said something more along the lines of, gunpowder, I know nothing of this gunpowder of which you speak. I've just been carried here a while to look after these barrels of red wine for a friend. But he didn't. He was somewhere in torture, remember torture when well men wars his fellow conspirators. For his part in the dastardly plan of attempted regicide, he was sentenced to a decent years. He was sentenced to be unrolled and quartered. This meant he'd be hung by the neck till practically dead, but while still alive, he'd be cut down, he'd be sliced from his navel to his breastbone. His intestines would be drawn out of his living body. They'd be coated in tar and pitch and set afire, shown to his agonized face where he was attached to 4 strong horses, which would be driven north, east, south and west, ripping him apart. Well, our wayward son of York had a lucky escape, and deprived the onlooking crowd of his usual spectacle. As he ascended the steps of the scaffold, he tripped, fell from the scaffold, and broke his neck, killing himself instantly. A lucky escape, I call that. The school must have been a hotbed of religious, political dissent, as out of the 8 conspirators, 3 of them attended that school. The other 2 were brothers John and Christopher Wright. They died in a halo of government and parliamentarian musket fire in a shootout in West Midlands from information gained from Guy Fawkes under torture. They do have a bonfire at St. Peter's every year, but they don't burn an effigy of Guy Fawkes. As the headmaster said, it's like 3 bad form to burn an old wood over the Right, I'd now like to attract your attention to that tower over there on the left-hand side. Most people just think it's part of York City Wall, but actually it's not. It's the western defensive tower of an incredibly rich Benedictine monastery formed in the year 1088. That's St. Mary's Tower, and it protected St. Mary's Abbey. The Abbey was a practicing abbey all the way until 1536, when it fell foul of King Henry VIII's Reformation. The Abbey was dissolved, all of the incredible wealth was absorbed by the crown. Most of the work stone of the Abbey itself was robbed out for local building projects. However, that tower stood intact all the way to the English Civil War. During the English Civil War, York was a royalist town. The Cavalier troops sheltered in the grounds of the Abbey. When the Roundheads laid siege onto York, they arrayed their cannons on the back boxes and pounded the Abbey and the Cavaliers and that tower until all that remained is what you see today. Well, we know what happened with the war. Cavaliers, romantic but wrong, Roundheads, boring but right. Now, the only building that survived intact from the actual days of the Abbey itself is this beautiful black and white timbered building over here on the left-hand side. That's the St. Mary's Hospitium. The Hospitium where pilgrims who make the long journey to pray here with the monks of St. Mary's Abbey could rest after their long, arduous journeys. The grounds of the Abbey were repurposed in the early 19th century by the York Philosophical Society, and they caused to be built that rather grand neoclassical colonnaded building just at the top of the rise there. That's the home of the Yorkshire Museum, from which the gardens are named. If you carry on looking at that, Kieran, you might just catch a peek over some of the arches of the original priory. There's not very much left, but they are very beautiful indeed. Now, directly in front of us, we have one of the two cast iron bridges that we boast of here in York. This is Lendal Bridge, and it also marks the entry into the medieval city. You can see the medieval city walls going off to the right-hand side. Now, those of you who know your bridges or live in London, I think that's very similar to Westminster Bridge, especially at road times with those ornate railings and those lanterns. Well, this one was built in 1863 by Sir Thomas Page. After this, he moved to London, and guess what? He designed Westminster Bridge. Now, as we enter the medieval city, I'd like to attract your attention to that beautiful building on the left-hand side. I mentioned it in part in it earlier. That's the 15th century York of the Old Hall. In those very rooms, the £250,000 ransom for King Charles I was counted out before being sent north to Scotland. King James II, his entire court and entourage stayed in those rooms as part of his national tour after his coronation. I would like to attract your attention to the ground floor, those black marks around the windows, and you see how they cut off in a dead straight line. Well, that dead straight line measures the height of that flood in the year 2000. It wiped off those scorch marks, or that is what they are, in that dead straight line. Those scorch marks themselves come from a ill-fated night in 1942, when a stray incendiary bomb dropped from a Luftwaffe Ju-88 and intent from the railway station, missed its target. It struck the 15th century Guildhall, setting the roof ablaze. The wooden roof collapsed onto the wooden floors underneath. The whole building was gutted, but luckily the stonework remained more or less intact. However, it did take 20 years to restore the interior to its former glory. It reopened in 1962, and that 20 years is the only time that that building has not been in constant use since the 15th century. Well, directly in front of us now we have York's oldest bridge. This is the number 5 of 5 Ouse bridges that have occupied this very spot. This one was built in 1820 and actually replaced a wooden Tudor bridge by the same name. And that Tudor bridge was festooned with houses, shops, businesses, a prison, and one of England's first outdoor toilets, which was a shack with a hole in the floor that emptied straight into the river. We should be okay going underneath because it has been removed and it's too early for the pub to throw out. Anyway, they couldn't simply demolish the wooden structure. That would have cut York and Yorkshire in half. What they had to do was build this half of the bridge up against the wooden structure. When this half was completed and open to the public, they could then demolish the Tudor bridge and build the second half of this one. As we pass underneath, if you look, you will see the actual join of the two parts of the bridge. That join also marks those two phases of construction. There it is, just there. Well, now as you come up behind the Ouse Bridge, we enter the inland port of York. There's been an inland port here for just under 2,000 years. If you look to the right on the Queen's Estate, you'll see well-preserved facade of Woodmill Quay and some of the cranes that used to operate here. Also, the ghost outline of the warehouses going down the rest of Queen's Estate gives testament to the heavy industrial nature of this port in its heyday. And in its heyday, it was the second busiest inland port in the country outside of London itself. Goods from all over the world, such as cocoa, sugars, dried fruits, spices, were all brought here by humber sailing barges. You can imagine the picture with those steam cranes bellowing big clouds of black coal smoke and hissing steam as they dragged those sacks of exotic goods from the decks of the Humber Seine barges up into the warehouses. I've seen pictures in Victorian times where those Humber Seine barges were moored up so tightly you could more or less walk from one side of the river to the other without even getting your feet wet, or the Anglo-Saxon word wetted. Alas, these are no longer warehouses. They're now hotels, dignities, flats, Airbnbs. Not much freight used by river in England anymore. However, my favourite of the conversions is this one on the end, on the right-hand side. That's the old bonding warehouse where some exotic goods from all over the world can be stored until such time as the customs and excise duties to be paid on them, and they can be released out into the easily waiting marketplace. Well, then ahead of us we have the second of Thomas Page's actual cast iron bridges. Now, I understand that does mark the other end of the medieval city of York, but I'll talk about it a little bit more when we come back upstream. For now, I'd like to attract your attention to the gap between the Bonding Warehouse and the bridge. If you look to the right and through the bridge canopy, you'll see a small green hill. That small green hill is presumably left over from the conquest of Britain by the Normans. The Normans in their siege of York, which had been followed before, built two large hills on the other side of the river. This one remaining was still a bathing hill. On top of those hills, they built two motivated castles. To control access to the port, they took a great change to the river at this location. By raising the road change, they could provide the ground for extra itself. Now, as we go out of the medieval city on the bridge, we're not very well medieval York, well, open fair at the time. It was the second biggest city in England, and it was the capital of Northumbria. Northumbria was the biggest administrative area in the whole of the country. It stretched from the Humber River all the way up to and including southeast Scotland. It was the influence of J.R. Martin's Game of Thrones, and in fact, it even Candy Durham himself said it was called the Dragonville. And it doesn't matter how many times they said they used to have one, I don't believe it. Oh, I mentioned those Humber sailing barges earlier. Here on the right-hand side, you have the example of one of those Humber sailing barges. This one would be blue and white construct with a black head and black hull. She was built in 1904. When you built the main form of propulsion of a large mast and sails with a keyboard down either side of the hull. Giving us some stability that we've been coastal there. Local agents having to track every vessel usually do them because it just some changes are like the large mast has been removed along with the keyboard down the side, and the engine is still have a new hands and she's still a commercial vessel. She's now an Airbnb, so she's still bringing business into Europe. If you ever wanted to explore the sailing barge, you need to do a look at that. I'm not on commitment, I'm not telling you. Well, I'm a boat geek, and as you can imagine, this boat is my favourite boat in this whole stretch of the river. It's just got agricultural barge, Monastic. She was a working girl, plying her trade around along the canals of Amsterdam and the rest of Holland. She's got a bit of a checkered history as well. In the 1940s, she was commandeered by the German